Our final session today is going to speak about the retail conundrum. So if any of you were here to start the track of sessions and heard my opening remarks, I talked a wee bit about the conundrum. I shared a couple different statistics from Euromonitor International, where I work. So on the one hand, you have the shift to the online channel. So we see online sales growing 10 times faster in the digital channel versus those bought in store. That's a 5-year forecasted figure. But at the same time, when you survey consumers, about 50% of them say they want to go in store to touch and feel. So you have those two seemingly opposite forces hitting heads and reshaping the retail industry as we know it. So I'm going to turn the stage over to my dear conference attending pal, Jordan McKee. We travel the globe together, it seems. He's with 451 Research, and he, along with his panelists, are going to unpack that conundrum.
Hey everybody, a few brave souls out there sticking around for the last session of the day. Appreciate the attendance. So, yeah, as Michelle mentioned, the session's called the Retail Conundrum, and really the goal here is to unpack 3 conundrums that are facing retailers, but not just retailers, really the value chain in its entirety. And the goal, hopefully, is to have some lively discussion and share some different vantage points around how to approach each of those conundrums and hopefully leave you with some different perspectives as to how you should be thinking about these challenges. So, first to give you some context through the lens at which each of my panelists are looking at these conundrums through, I'd love if each of you could share a bit about yourself and the company you work for. So we'll start with you.
Hi. My name is Goran Abramovich, and I'm a CEO of a company called Own Solutions. So we act as a bridge between a consumer who is in the physical world and digital players' economies by utilizing the convenience store sector. So we as a company, we have 20,000 locations throughout Europe in mostly convenience stores that we provide the infrastructure for electronic distribution of products and services. These products and services can range from mobile top-up to public transportation ticketing, but most importantly, e-money products, money transfer, Western Union, MoneyGram, prepaid Visa, MasterCards, and products like that.
Very good. Amos?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Amos Kater. I'm head of online within Currents with my team, responsible for several products, but most relevant for today, it's the product Ideal, the leading e-commerce payment method in the Netherlands with a market share in e-commerce of around 60%. Also a little bit moving into the physical world with Ideal QR codes. Great street artists working outside to create an Ideal QR code in 3D. I welcome all of you to look and see it at Entrance K, and that's it for now.
Nikki.
Perfect. So I'm Nikki Koopman. I'm the Senior Vice President for Aevi. At Aevi, what we do is we provide basically the foundation for next generation acquiring for merchant payment solution providers, helping them to move from the classic payment solution into the new digital value-added services world.
Very good. And Will?
So I think you had from me a little bit ago to say, but I'm at Invincible Brands, and we're a brand builder, influencer marketing business.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. So we have 3 conundrums to get through in a short amount of time, so we're going to keep things lively, but we're going to keep moving as well. The first one that I want to unpack is one that I call the store is dead, long live the store. So we've all heard the conflicting narratives that are out there. If you read the papers and you read different trade publications, you'd be forgiven for thinking that retail stores are pretty much dead. At the same time, you're also seeing a lot of coverage around this phenomenon of online brands moving offline. And there's some interesting trends that you can unpack there. So if you look at some data from PwC, specific to the UK market, last year of the top 500 high street retailers, 2,500 store closures, an increase of 40% year over year. At the same time, if you look at what went on last year, some really interesting major players moved from the online world into the physical world. Of course, Amazon, but many others like Warby Parker. So the way I want to start this discussion, I'm going to make this a little challenging. I'm going to pose a question, and you're going to give me a short response, 3 options, and then we'll qualify those responses. So the question is this: thinking about the future of commerce, will brick and mortar stores, 1, not exist, 2, exist in a different form factor, or 3, continue to exist the way they do today? And so give me a short answer of those 3 options. We'll unpack it further.
Yeah. They will continue to exist. They always will.
As they do today.
As they do today with organic changes, as the industry is changing, they're changing too. They need to follow the trends.
Okay. Amos?
Yeah, I fully agree. They will continue to exist, but totally different.
Very good. We'll get to that soon.
True,
Looking
that
forward
is
to
very
that.
interesting. I believe they will exist indeed, but it's about leveraging the best of both worlds, as you said.
Okay. And Will?
I think they'll exist in a totally different format and be seen as just a channel.
Okay. Some interesting perspectives. So, Amos, I'd love to start with you. You sound like you've got a hot take.
For me, there is a big difference. And the difference is that a brick and mortar store can do much more on the surface, on a personal level. And I think that if you want to continue to exist as a store in the street, you need to offer service that I cannot make in an online environment. So differentiating more, what we have done is we moved stores to an online environment. That's quite simple. But now changing the existing stores to a real service center, I think that's the future of the store.
So do you agree with that, or you have a complete...
I agree with that, but for example, I'm focused on the convenience store sectors. And those are like 7-Elevens, VH Smiths, and others. And I've been in that industry for the last 15 years, and I've seen them already changing. And 20 years ago, they were based on newspapers and cigarettes and lottery. Those 3 products are gone, but the stores didn't go. And I agree with Will, they will need to become a portal. And that's what, between the consumer in the physical world and the digital players. And we see that happening. We see 7-Elevens selling a lot of digital currency, virtual currency. We see Amazon delivering packages into those stores. So we see the stores are already making the change.
Will, you mentioned that there's a need for some innovation to stay relevant. What in particular do you think that needs to happen to move forward?
So, as a retailer, the sort of essence of what you do is figure out how you can best serve your customer. And I think if you start with that, then actually, depending on what your business might be, if you're a artisanal butcher that's providing the best meat you can possibly buy, then actually having your primary channel as a boutique shop, in a very expensive high street could be perfect. But actually, you're probably missing out if you're not doing some mail order delivery on the side and promoting yourself through Instagram and so on. So I think the difficulty is that the biggest problem anyone has is removing their baggage, and our baggage in the West is that if you start a business retailing, you start with bricks and mortar. That ends, and I think has ended. You now have to start with what are you trying to do in terms of how are you trying to serve your customer, and what's the best channel to do that. And rethinking what convenience and personal interaction and other factors a store estate can bring that differentiates you from your competition.
Nikki, I'll ask you a bit more of a pointed question, because I'm curious about Aevi and sort of how you're able to help the end retailer. I know you go through partners to reach the retailer, but how you help them adapt and sort of move forward with the pace of change in the physical space.
So I think what we do, and especially focused on the SMB space, with Smart POS, you can actually create a world of opportunity, allowing these offline retailers, but serving them with the online tools that these big e-commerce guys have. And for me, listening to this, I agree to a certain point, but for me, what I love on a Sunday when it's raining is to order in pizza, right? That is the beauty of online. At the same time, I'm a Nike freak, and I love to go into a Nike store to feel the actual shoe, fit it on, because this one is different in sizing than the Air Force One. Going in there, feeling it, touching it, buying it, even if it's an impulse buy, I'm still happy with it the day after. But the beauty of Nike, actually, what I like is you go into a physical store, you touch the shoe, and then you can completely rebrand it any way you like it, where they are using the power of online again in order to get this unique type of shoe. So just drifting off a little bit, but I think it's really a balance in both will exist, but it's a matter of how to implement it and how to make sure that it's implemented in a way that it serves your customer in the best way possible.
What was your answer on the question? Yes or no?
So for me, no, it was my answer was actually it depends on how it's implemented.
So it's
Because
different.
There
You
is
agree
no
it's
yes or no.
No, just to be sure that you're in line with me.
Very good.
And to use Nikki's Nike example, Best Buy and Amazon. I mean, Best Buy did exactly that thing.
Yeah.
That's how they became relevant to the consumers. They created a guru squad. They gave ability to people to go into a store, physically touch it, see how it sounds, and then go online and buy it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's about that relationship, right? So it's not only a distribution channel, but it's also the relationship with your end client,
Right.
making sure that something is happening there.
And do we agree with the approach of these showroom stores that are popping up, where you can take an example of a retailer like Lululemon that has some very experiential stores where you can go and you can touch and feel the clothing, you can try it on, but you don't actually leave with the product. They're going to ship that to you, right? You're going to get that in a few days. Is that a good example of how retailers can embrace change in the physical world and think differently about their storefronts?
Yeah, I think that I think there are going to be a bunch of different models. I think a lot of it depends on the product. If you know you're buying athleisure, then it's probably slightly different than if you've run out of contact lenses and you need some there and then.
Yep.
But I think the fascinating bit again, particularly for this group of people, is the enabler that will transform how bricks and mortar retail works is payment. And what you're seeing with the Amazon checkout-less stores, which most of the other big retailers are experimenting with now at the moment, what you're seeing with showcasing, etc., is if you remove the friction of payment significantly from the experience of bricks and mortar, then that can really change and play around with what you can do in your interactions with the customer whilst they're in store. So I think the types of developments we're seeing in payment tech will really drive how bricks and mortar changes.
Can I just follow up quickly to that? In Philadelphia, I think they banned the stores that do not accept cash because of financial inclusion.
Yeah.
So how is that going to play? When you actually have Amazon, you have, in my case, in Valora, Switzerland, they have a store without no attendance, you just walk out. Then comes the question of financial inclusion. You're leaving a big segment of people out of that.
That's what I said. It's all about, in retail, about the service that you can deliver. And it probably depends also on the goods that you sell. If it's a convenience store where you just want to run in and out, and you can do seamless payments, it's fine. If you accept cash, then maybe other group of people will be there. So I think it depends on who are your customers, what kind of services do you offer. But in generally, it's all about thinking from your customers first and what they want. And if you really think about that, then you can offer the service they want. It can be cashless. I hate cash. I never have cash. Give me my phone and I can pay. That's what I want. But that's everybody its own way and own take.
All right, so in the interest of time, we're moving on to the next conundrum. The usability versus security balancing act. So customers want both of these things. They want secure experiences, they want exceptional usability, but both of these concepts are kind of inherently in opposition of each other. If you have two lacks of protocols to ensure a really great and seamless experiences, there's a good chance you're going to see fraud rates spike as a merchant. But if you have too onerous of security protocols, there's a very good chance that you've built something so secure that your customers can't get into, and you're going to see conversion rates drop quite precipitously. And so I'm going to start off this conundrum the same way we did the last one, with a quick answer, and then we'll qualify it. So thinking about this topic, usability versus security, is it ever okay for retailers to promote usability over security? Never, sometimes, always.
Never.
That really depends. It really depends on what is the case. If it's about my personal data, never. If it's about payments and they take the risk, I'm fine. Make it as usable as what. If they take the risk of the security, I have no problem.
Yeah, so sometimes. Nikki?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I think massively, the answers you'll get will be massively driven by demographic, age, and particularly geography. You'll get a very different answer to that in the East and also from the younger generation than you will elsewhere. And I think that probably suggests there's an increasing move as people get older and the younger generation become more where the spending power is towards people worrying a little less around the security. But interestingly, I think the question there is also, where does the security fall? So if you look at what I think was really well done with the rollout of contactless payments, actually it wasn't the consumer who took the risk on the piece. It was a slight trade-off of £30, whatever the limits were to begin with. But I think that's a great example of where there's usually a commercial solution to it that doesn't have to involve the customer.
So are there any other good examples we can point to where you can loosen up security to promote usability and ideally find a balance somewhere in there? Any others that come to mind? Or the reverse approach where you have to tighten up security to compromise usability?
Well, I mean, it does come down where the liability shift. If there is a liability shift, then you can provide some usability to the consumers. But today, I think everybody is associating security to the privacy. And I don't want to, as a technology provider to the merchants and retailers, I don't want to, that the consumers ever question, was the merchant at fault, or did they expose some of my data? Do I have to deal with the credit card charge that it wasn't done? So it's a reputational problem. So for me, it's never, merchants should never.
They liked your response.
I don't think so. I think they have beers.
I think your question, I'm thinking about it, but it depends so much on, I don't think there are compromises on security. However, I think there is a lot of developments going on that makes it better or easier to get higher usability with the same levels of security.
So give me an example at Ideal. So how are you working?
Like Ideal, one of the things we currently do is, what I said is we implement the Ideal QR code. So if you have to do a payment, the Ideal QR code pops up on your screen. Open your banking app with this authentication measures of your banking app. Scan the code, pay. That's usability perspective, very easy. You don't have to fill anything. Just scan the QR code with your known banking app. That's no compromise on security, not at all. It's utilizing security measures that currently are available in mobile phones, with fingerprints and that kind of device fingerprinting as well. What makes it that the security is probably even better than it was before, but the usability is higher.
Okay, interesting. And Nikki, when you think about what's going on with the Smart POS ecosystem, are there any examples there where you have to compromise one over the other?
Well, not per se compromise. I really believe, especially what we do in Smart POS and with applications, for us, what we see is, for example, the difference on how an application, so a business solution, as, for example, loyalty, is being used on a different type of hardware. So if you would have PIN on glass, the way we look at security from a business point of view, but also from a technical point of view, will be different than having a device that is dual screened because of the setup and the nature of the device. So that comes into play, into mind when I think of what we do at Aevi. But yeah, in the end of the day, I really believe we see loads of different business applications from all over the world. And I guess if you look at how we treat that, it's really a matter of, one, common sense. I mean, security, you can look to a certain point, right? And then we would do a vetting on the business side of things, but equally important, vetting on the security and the technical side of these developers. As they're all third-party companies, there are no huge listed companies, right? These are all developers that are small and medium enterprises themselves, really good at the solution they are developing, but they are going to open up their solution to a wider base.
Does anybody have a take, just to switch gears slightly, on strong customer authentication, the regulation that's being introduced in Europe come September 14th? Does that feel like we're compromising usability significantly to promote security? Is that breaking that balance? Does anyone have a take on that?
Well, I'll answer a little bit more generically. I think the companies that actually are making, it's all about customer journey and reducing the friction in interaction between a merchant and a consumer. And the companies that are able to provide a technical solution to reduce that friction, but have the same level of security as they have today, are going to be the winners. And we already see these kind of companies emerging and comparing to the last 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest problems we have in the West in particular, or in democratic nations, is we have a apparent knowledge gap from legislators. And I think that's really beginning to hurt us. So, for example, if you look at a classic security versus usability piece, take what's happened with car security over the last 10 years. 5 years ago, car crime and stolen cars at an all-time low across almost all jurisdictions. Then keyless ignition introduced, and been massive crime sprees. And what you naturally have is outrage from customers who have this happening, but you have legislators step in to put, and insurance companies put pressure on the manufacturers to adjust. And I think normally you always have, I don't think you get to decide what that balance is. I think both the consumers and in a democracy, the legislators get to decide that. The problem is, with most our democracies, you have people who don't understand how Facebook work, who don't understand the difference between an Apple and an Android phone, who are then trying to make up legislation to protect us. And even on very basic legislation like the European legislation around cookie consent, that is one of the most irritating, unuser-friendly, utterly pointless, every second irritation in my life, driven by the fact that the people who did it had the right idea, knew there was some sensible focus there, because there absolutely should be, but constructed the solution in in my view, a completely inept way. And I think there is a real danger with that as you get into more and more complexity. GDPR, great in many ways piece of legislation, but again, with that, some of the stuff around the edges is complex. So I think we all need to put pressure on our elected representatives to get more clued up on technology to be able to, provide the role they should be playing on controlling this as well.
So that leads us in actually quite nicely to our last conundrum, which is sort of inextricably intertwined with the one we were just discussing. It's about conflicting consumer demands for personalization and privacy. If you look at any consumer research that's out there, and our research points to this as well, customers will say, we want these very immersive contextual experiences that are personalized to us. But at the same time, we also see that they tell us they want privacy, right? They want security over their personal information, and they're concerned about how businesses are using their data. And so I'll give you a couple examples of data points we've collected, and this is on a global basis. We find 75% of shoppers say it's satisfying when a retailer serves them up a personalized offer that's based off of their past purchase history. We also find that 1 in 3 consumers, again globally, say they're less trusting of businesses compared to this time last year when it comes to protecting their personal information. So we'll start off similar to before. Do consumers actually care about privacy? Yes or no?
They do, but they will give you some leeway if you give them some value for it.
They do more and more.
Nikki?
It really depends who you ask. If you ask my dad, he will definitely say yes. If you would ask my younger sister, she definitely says, I really don't care, I just want it.
And Will?
I think universally people care about control. I don't think it's privacy so much. I think it's around you feeling that you've taken the decision that either you're not bothered and anyone can have access to it, or that you really don't you really want to restrict that. And I think technology becomes a great enabler to that.
So that's a good point, and let's kind of open this up a bit. So how do businesses broker trust in the digital age? Because that's kind of what this comes down to. There needs to be some sort of trust that if I'm exchanging my information, I should be receiving something that adds value to my life in some way, shape, or form. How do businesses go about that?
It takes time. I think the best examples are airline frequent flyer programs. They provide me a value, and they know everything about me. But it took a long time for me to start trusting them and giving them. They know where I sit, they know where I like to fly, they like my food preference, they know everything about me. And I'm willing to give them information because I do feel that I get the value back. But it took quite a long time to establish that kind of trusted relationship between myself and the airline company. But if I read some kind of news article that they had a data breach and other things, I'll start to rethink that. And I think Facebook is actually a perfect example of that, where people are willing to provide some data. Now they're pulling back from it.
Any other thoughts on how to broker trust?
Yeah, I think trust is a very difficult thing to grab, because it's also about control, as already mentioned. How far I'm in control. A lot of new apps or new things, people will trust in the beginning, or at least try. But they also stop very soon. So trust is a tricky thing. It takes time to get it really, but it's broken really easy.
Absolutely.
And that's the tricky thing, and especially for long existing brands, if it's broken, it's very difficult. Yeah. And so I think trust is probably the most difficult thing to really get as a company. The question if it's really only about trust, because your question was also about privacy and how much do they give about it. And I think it's also an aging thing, as Nikki already said. Although I see with my own kids that they more and more think about it. So and they are around 19 and 20. They start to think now, what's the impact of the privacy? So it's probably something that in the new age. And where we are now, it's difficult for us to teach our children how to work with trust and privacy. So I strongly believe, and that's why I said it's growing, more and more people start to think about privacy again. So that's why I said that.
Yeah. I completely agree. However, no, I think going on trust, I think as in any relationship, really in general, it's about transparency, right? And managing expectations. Yep. If you understand what you're actually getting, and you understand that somebody's not abusing trust, you will be fine with it. And I think in my world, a really good example would be you go to a coffee shop right now, you get a physical stamp card, a loyalty card, you get a stamp on it, and you know that then time you come back, you get a free coffee, right? Mm-hmm. No emails, no other commercial advertising stuff around it. But then if you would sign up in the same chain for an online loyalty system, and all of a sudden, every single day, you get bombarded with advertising on this free coffee or this special thing, then the expectation isn't met, and you feel, well, the whole loyalty, the whole trust goes. So it's all about implementation and how that works. And then with privacy, I guess it really depends when you look at age, what privacy really means to somebody. Where I guess people, and especially the younger generation, gets quite savvy on what type of pictures do you want to be public or not. But obviously there was quite a steep learning curve in going everything being public, realizing, okay, if I want to have an internship, it might not be the best way showing how drunk I was on the summer holiday, right? So it's all about, with any innovation, how to deal with it, struggle, fall, stand up again, and then going to your point, having the right guys to actually build the legislation that understand the technology.
But also, I mean, I'm a solution provider to retailers. So a lot of times they want to add new products and services. It's my job to educate them about the trust issues and about how the technology can help them, because retailers know how to sell goods and physical goods and services. And now we have these digital products coming on in their stores. They don't know much about them. So it's my job as well, not just to provide the technology, it's also to guide them how to build the trust with the consumers as well.
Yeah, so going back to your earlier point, and I want to get into this topic specifically around legislation. Does GDPR kill opportunities for personalization? the regulators think about that the wrong way, or is this a smart, much needed regulation for our industry?
So, given I made comments about it earlier, I'll dive in. I think actually GDPR is broadly a good piece of legislation. I think it addressed a need that, from my perspective, and my background was running big coalition loyalty programs and dealing with lots of customer data all over the place. I think you need a imposed standard of playing field in there that I think GDPR did, and you can see, to a degree, the success of that in terms of how much it's really being implemented elsewhere around the world. I think some of the technical challenges around it, for example, in terms of, for global businesses who operate outside just the EU, how that works with then different legislation, etc. There's some stuff around the edges that could have been better thought out, but in principle, I think that's actually an example of a pretty good piece of legislation.
But we're also in the very early days of GDPR. I mean, there is no so much fines. I mean, I, as a CEO of a solution company, I had to sign so many GDPR processor contracts that provide such a liability for us as a company, but I had to do it.
Yep.
And nobody's talking, there's still not big fines or anything, but they come along.
Right.
All the solution providers will have to think, do I need that liability? Do I need to increase the prices to the retailers? How the end consumer is going to feel about it as well. So I think we're very early days of GDPR, which is a good, overall, it's a very good platform.
Interesting perspective. With that, we're out of time. I know, we're the barrier between all of you and drinks, so appreciate you coming out. Enjoy the rest of the show, and round of applause to the panelists for their perspectives.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan and company, for an engaging session at the end. So for all of you that have joined us today, we appreciate it. Of course, we know industry lines are blurring and channels are becoming more are converging as well. At the end of the day, it's all about being probably consumer-centric. So go enjoy tonight, Taste of Amsterdam. Don't forget your wristbands. You need to pick them up at the information area. Thank you.